So we're back on Fresh Waves. This morning is Pride Day on Fresh Waves. And we are talking with Suzanne Sherkin, whose daughter transitioned to a son. And we're talking with Lisa Ronco, who is a Stouffville resident and is organizing the first Pride Festival in Stouffville. And I don't care what gender you are, and I don't care how you identify, because it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
A heterosexual man could easily have done what you're doing.
Probably.
They could have.
Could have.
The thing is, as long as we're all working for something that has the best of intentions and is inclusive of everybody, I don't think the Pride Festival will say, heterosexuals not welcome.
Yeah, no.
Not at all.
It's
It's an inclusive event, and they don't really care who you are, just as long as you're a nice person with good intentions and you're coming to participate in a friendly community event.
Right.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
No soapboxes preaching anti-homosexual rhetoric. None. No people who are going to try and change the way you think and are.
No.
Has anyone ever done that to you in your life, in your experience? Tried to say to you, no, you actually want to get married and have a nice husband and
Yes, I have.
15 children.
Actually, yes, I have. Actually, how old was I? I think I was in my early 20s, because at that point, the only person that knew that I was gay was my cousin. And I was engaged to a man, because I thought this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm Italian, and this is my path, and maybe I'm wrong in knowing who I thought I was. And it got to the point where my cousin just looked at me and he goes, if you go through with this, you'll probably end up committing suicide. He goes, this is not you. And I thought about that, and I went, oh my God, he's right. Because I was doing this to hide. I didn't want, at that time, you don't want people to know who you are. And I called off the wedding, and I called everything, everyone's like, why? And I said, oh, I don't remember even the excuse I used, but I blamed it on him. He was such a nice guy. Like, he was super nice. He was not a bad person at all. And I truly, like, I feel so bad that I did that to that person. And he went off, got married, had kids. I was like, thank God. Like, thank God I didn't break him. Thank God he's okay. And I continued my journey. So, yes, it did. You get that. You get that from society. You get that from, even though your family doesn't want to hurt you in any way, but there's protocol. There's things you have to do. You got to get married. You got to buy a car. You got to buy a house. There's all these things, tick boxes that you got to check off. And you realize, well, I'm not that person. And here I am, like, I'm not married, right now I'm single, so if anyone knows anyone,
We'll just put that out there.
Put it out there, why not, right? If you know someone that's nice and decent, female, but yeah, like, it is what you go through that, and I think, for me anyways, it made me stronger, it made me who I am today. So, did they pull me down? Did they? No, they just made me stronger, so.
Well, I'll tell you, about 15 years ago, I had one of those aha moments. I was speaking with some women, I was wandering down the beach, and they were talking about a book that I heard the title of the book, and I thought, hey, I've read that book, and I said, it was a great book, and we started talking about books. 45 minutes later, we morphed from books and why we like certain books into our lives and who we were, and well, do you have kids? Things that women talk about. And both of them had kids. Both of them were divorced. And when one of them referred to the other as, well, my partner and I go for counseling all the time, and then I realized that the partner wasn't some mystery man that I hadn't met. In fact, it was this other woman. My poker face wasn't on, and she looked at me and realized that I was a little shocked because it never even crossed my mind. Yeah. And she said, yes, I got divorced. I was married to a really nice man, but we grew in different directions. I didn't leave him for another man or for another woman. I left. And 3 years later, I fell in love. And I'm so happy to be in love. And I know now how precious love is. Wow. I just happened to fall in love with a woman.
That's a wonderful story.
Yeah. And it was wonderful because to me, all of a sudden, it wasn't this person who was militant about who they were, had this thing where they were going to stand up and tell the world. Quietly, they just fell in love. And it happened to be two women. And that's what it's all about, I
But
guess.
isn't that how
it's
love
just
usually
love.
works? It's a quiet little thing for anybody. It doesn't matter what gender you are.
Yeah.
Like,
So it's not a nasty, ugly thing. It's not warped in any way. It's just two people being in love. Or 3 or 4. But 2, by and large. We'll get to the 3 or 4 at another show. But you know what? For now, 2 is good. And I think it's a wonderful thing. Love how can it be anything but a wonderful thing? And I guess for Skylar, you hope that he finds love like that too in his life at some point.
He's in a relationship and has been in a relationship for 4 years with a woman. The two of them are happy in a
That's
relationship.
great.
Yeah.
awesome.
It's terrific. Because when you think about it, you take all of the packaging and everything off of everything that we could ever want for our kids as parents. The bottom line is you want them to be happy. And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure your parents are the same, Lisa.
Yep. Well, I lost my father when I was 19. So,
Oh, that's too bad.
yeah, totally. It was devastating. I don't, when I say he didn't know from my mouth that I was gay, but as you spoke, I was listening to when you were on. Parents know their kids. Regardless, good, bad, indifferent, you know your kids better than they know themselves.
In some ways, yeah.
I believe in all ways. And my dad, I believe, knew. Did I have to come out and tell him? No, he was my father. So would he have supported me? I believe he would have. Like, even being Italian and an immigrant, I believe he was way ahead of himself. I have always said that. He was more modern than most Italian men of his generation. So, yeah.
And sometimes it's not that the parents judge you poorly, but more so that they wish a life of ease for their children.
Yep.
You know, even I know somebody whose son chose to be an underwater welder. And it was like the end of the world to these two parents. Not because they didn't love him, not because they didn't respect his choice, but because they were afraid for him. Because it's such a high-risk job, and they understood why it was thrilling to him and everything. But it was a fear. And I think a lot of the reactions or initial reactions from families is one that we were talking about or alluding to earlier, where it's just that unknown. But they don't know how to react. And then it's followed by a fear of, I mean, it must have been awful for you to hear that Skylar was beaten up.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, we want our kids to have an easy path. We also want them to have an authentic path.
Yeah.
And so, the metaphor that always comes in my mind is, as a parent, how can we be a sweeper? You know, in curling, you know, there's that job that sweeps the
Before
ice.
they get there.
The rock, can move as fast as it can. Well, that's what I feel like I want to do for my kids. Like sweep away
all the dirt,
debris in front so that they can actually have an easy path, whatever their path is.
Right.
And it will never be easy, and because they have to have their own hardships too.
Well, it is another Rumi quote.
Yes.
If you can see your path laid out before you, it's not your path.
Oh.
That's someone
that's
else's
good.
path.
Oh.
Yours, you discover as you walk.
I like that.
That's a great quote. Yeah. That's great.
It's so true. You know, I've always used the analogy with kids and people, kids especially, of the leaf and the tree. The leaf is going to fall out of the tree and it's going to end on the ground, because that's what happens to trees with leaves. And as a parent, you can pick the leaf off the tree and place it on the ground where you think it's going to land. But you have no idea. When that tree shakes free of its leaves, that leaf might get caught up in the wind and swirl. It might go higher than the tree ever was. It might land right where you put it, but it might land half a mile away. So let it be. Because it's going to land where it needs to land. And if you put it down, yes, you've accomplished what it was set out to do. But it may not have landed in the right spot.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, I think, the way we have to look at the whole world.
Yeah.
You know, we leave, all people we meet throughout our lives and along our path. I'm sure you've met some really interesting folks along your path, Lisa.
Yes, very interesting people along the path.
Some who may not be as accepting of your choices.
Absolutely.
As your immediate
not
family.
choices.
This
wasn't a choice.
Your expression.
Well, and not even. And I was born the way I was born. You were born the way you were born. And you end up where you end up just due to experiences in life. I didn't choose who I am. I am who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. As your son didn't choose to be transgender, he was born transgender.
Right.
It is. And
but you have chosen to express yourself in a kind of a public way now. And whereas some people choose not to do that.
Right. Yes.
Right?
I guess that I chose. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, interesting. If Skylar meets someone today, there would be no reason for him to ever go into his back history.
Never. No. And so actually I had a bit of an internal conflict even in this show, going back to his story and using his female name. That was actually just by the by, that created a bit of a conflict for me because that person no longer exists. And I just used his name, his prior name and prior pronoun as context, but I don't like doing that.
Is it because you feel that you're letting him down? Because you've mentioned his previous name, his birth name, I'll call it?
That's a good question. Why do I feel that way? No, I don't think I'm letting him down. It just doesn't exist. So it's really for the benefit of the listener, not for the benefit of him.
Right. The authenticity of who he is not reflected in that name.
Exactly. Well said, Bren. Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a big responsibility as a parent giving a name to a child. It's funny when you said your name was Lisa, my daughter, my second daughter, when I was about to have my third, she said, okay, Mummy, if it's a girl, it's Lisa. And if it's a boy, I want him to be named Little Pencil.
Little Pencil?
Yes, Little Pencil. Which, at the age of 3, she had no idea what the connotations of that were, except that she watched the Bubaloos on, TV Ontario, and there was a character who was named Little Pencil. So,
that's too funny.
It was very cute, but it also got me thinking about what is a name and who gets a name, and a parent gives a child a name. You know, in Switzerland, there's a law that the name that you give to your child has to be approved by the courts, so that you can't name them Sunbeam or Peekaboo, that you have to have a name that will allow that child to be whoever they're going to be as they grow up without what they would deem to be weirdness going on. So we knew a family they wanted to name their son Satchmo after Louis Armstrong, and they had to prove that Satchmo was actually a name because in the list there it didn't exist. And they were Americans living in Switzerland at the time, and they had to show that this was actually a name in order to be legally allowed to name their child that.
The curious thing is why a court would approve a name. Why wouldn't a child approve a name?
Yeah.
That's what I think the law should be.
Yes.
That the child should approve the name.
And one of the Story Sisters that was in the group that we both have attended changed her name to Celeste, and it's the most interesting thing because throughout the weekend when I knew Celeste, I thought, I bet that wasn't your name at birth because it suits her so much, her whole personality. It's just who she is. And often as parents, we don't get that when they first pop out. They cry. They look at you with this scrunched up face and say, what the heck? I was having such a good time in there. Why am I here? And you got to name that. And sometimes it's a huge responsibility. And that's not often who they grow up to be. It's an interesting exercise if anyone's out there. It's a good way of looking inside yourself is to say, okay, if I had no name, what would my name be?
And that is such an interesting discussion, Bren, because a trans person, when they transition, one of the first things they do is choose their name. They choose their name.
Yeah.
And this is a name that they relate to. Skylar chose his name.
Did he ask you if you liked it? Did he have that conversation? Hey, Mom, this is what I'm thinking. Do you like it? Or did he just say, this is my name?
this is what I've chosen.
Yeah, usually they say
Isn't
this
that
is
great?
my
This
name.
is what, no, it wasn't seeking approval.
Yeah.
No, this is
This is
what he did say though, and I thought this was so great. He asked me, what his name would have been had he been a boy.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
And so I said his name would have been Aaron, Aaron, because that was my father's second name. And in the Jewish religion, you name your children after someone in the family. Yep. So that would have been my, so he was going to be named Aaron. And then he asked his father, and then he went to his father's side and chose his father's second name. So it's Charles. So it's so his full name is Schuyler Aaron Charles Hagen. And he's using and what's interesting is that so that spells sash. So I just want to come back. So that's really interesting because he's an artist and has always been an artist. He does these really wonderful original pieces that one day he will be known for. He never signed his work. Before he transitioned, he never signed his work. Wow. I said, why don't you just put Aviva down? Well, why don't you? He couldn't. It was really interesting. He never signed his work. And at the very end, he would put an A. He just never signed his work. Now, he has this lovely flourish of sash.
Nice.
Isn't that nice?
And so that is just another really interesting indication of his moving into his identity of who he is.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting little story.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. So have you always been Lisa?
Always been Lisa.
And you're good with that?
I'm good with it.
That's great. Yep. So before we run out of time here, because the time just slips away on Fresh Waves, tell us about this event in September.
Yes.
What day is it?
It's Saturday, September 7th.
Okay.
Right now it's 10 till 5. Our very first event. It's going to be family friendly, all inclusive. We're going to have live music, art displays by both LGBT youth and artists in the community. We're going to have hopefully some giveaways. We're going to have Pride merchandise will be available for purchase. Our Stouffville York Regional Police will be here. Our Stouffville firefighters will be here. Hopefully, I'm trying to get them to do some kind of competition between each other.
Tug of war. That's always
something.
A good one.
I'm happy with it. As long as they have some females in uniform, I'm happy. Whitchurch Stouffville Library will be there. And hopefully more. We're looking for we're looking for, what's it called?
A sponsor.
Sponsors. We have Anand Date, who is actually our primary sponsor. Whitchurch Stouffville has granted us, so they're also our sponsor. But we're looking for more. So if anybody wants to have their businesses, booths, whatever you want to do, we're open.
Good.
So
that sounds great.
And we're looking for some authors to come and present their books and do a couple page readings or. Okay. So if your book is ready, we'd love to.
All right, I'm on.
Awesome. Even if it's not ready, just give us some of the good parts.
I have lots
That's
to
awesome.
Read.
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
And your book is, give us the title again.
It's called Transcending Gender, A Guide for Work and Home.
Work and home.
Right. And so it gives information and guidelines into how to identify, how to manage work life, whether you're a manager, you're a staff person, or you're someone who wants to transition in the workplace, and talks about what all those guidelines are, not only policies and procedures, but behaviors are at work. And also for families, whether you're a parent or a child or a family member, what the medical guidelines are, the emotional guidelines are, just what the family arrangements are.
Just navigating those waters.
Navigating them. And then there's a chapter on bathrooms and public bathrooms. And there's a really great chapter on language, which I was calling transology, but it's just it's a really good identifier and phrases and language to know when to use and not use.
That's awesome.
Well, one of my aunts, who was in her late 70s at the time, she said she met a friend of mine, and she said, I don't know if I'm right or not, but I think she's one of those Lizzies.
Oh.
A Lizzie. Okay.
That's nice.
And she was trying to be polite, but she didn't know the words, and she didn't have the
Right.
language.
Yeah. Right.
And I think, you know,
There's certain generations that people say, oh, Lisa, you got to tell them. And I'm like, you know what? There's a limit to when they're a certain age, they don't know. They only know what they were raised with.
right.
So
That's where
And there's
education.
blame
limited
them.
curiosity too.
yeah, they don't even understand to
But
be
hey,
curious.
that
so.
generation didn't talk about their own
Nothing.
heterosexual
No.
sexuality.
We
They
didn't
didn't.
even. We weren't. I'm still waiting for the sex talk.
Yeah,
We
I
weren't
didn't get a
given
sex
that.
talk.
We
I got
didn't-
a little brochure left on my pillow. It's like, what?
at least you got that. I
What?
didn't even get that.
Well, and our parents likely only got the Kinsey report,
Right.
Yeah,
which were the stats and information, and you know.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. And that's a whole other ballgame. That's the education piece. That's where the beginnings of this whole thing is the language that we've been speaking about. How to respectfully speak to people. That gives them instant respect. You know, if someone introduces themselves to me as Alvin, I don't say, so, hey, Al, how are you doing?
Right.
No, I was introduced, this man is Alvin, so you call him by the name that he called himself.
Right.
Or she calls herself.
Right.
And you try to be respectful. I say to my daughter, who's an artist, and she's all about proper pronouns, and she'll just, Mom! And I say to her, give me a break. I've been on this planet for over 50 years. 50 years of saying the same things over and over and over again. It's going to take me a little while to change from he or she to they.
So
It does
here's
take a while.
one piece of maybe not advice, but a consideration. If you meet someone and you don't know what their pronoun is, it's unclear whether they're male, female, or somewhere in between. Avoid the pronouns. Call
Use
them by
their
their
name.
first name
If you know it.
if you know it, or ask them.
Yeah.
What pronouns would, it's a very respectful question. What pronouns would you like me to use?
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
It's very respectful.
It is a simple thing, and I think once you open that dialogue, people are usually quite receptive, and they're quite willing to meet you halfway.
And one more thing around respectfulness. While it's respectful to ask about your pronouns, it is never respectful to ask about surgeries
Yeah.
around a trans person. I just needed to get that in.
Oh, that's a good thing to get in.
Never, ever, just like you wouldn't ask anybody. So, has your liver been operated on?
I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that one.
Whatever. You never ask people but you never ever ask people, they're trans people. We don't, curiosity around what's beneath someone's belt just needs to be a curiosity.
Right.
It's not
What's
acceptable.
beneath the kilt? Unless the wind blows, you're never going to know, and it's not your business
And it's
to
not
know.
your business. It's how they are presenting, how they are expressing themselves in their way. That's what you go with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. There's, dinner talk, and there's certain things you don't talk about around the table with the people who you're familiar with. Why would you bring that up with people who you're not familiar with? It doesn't make any sense. It's not your business to know.
No.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really looking forward to Pride in Stouffville, which would be September 7th.
Yes.
And what time of the day is it going to be?
Right now we're saying 10 till 5.
10 till 5? So it's
at
a
the Ball
daytime.
Diamond. Yeah, it's in Memorial Park. It's at the Ball Diamond and the Pavilion. We've got all surrounding area, and they're saying I'm being ambitious by saying 10 till 5 for our first Pride, and I'll be ambitious.
Are you going to have a parade?
No parade, no.
Oh.
No, this is all new to me. This is all this is overwhelming. Even just doing this event on the scale that it's on, I'm good with what it is.
Right.
And who knows in 5 years what we'll do, and
Right.
right now, let's go small.
It's exciting.
It is.
Congrats, Lisa,
Thank you.
for having
Thank
that
you.
vision.
Thank you.
I think it's going to be wonderful. Well, I want to thank both of you women for coming in today.
Thank you.
Both of you people.
For inviting us.
Both of you people.
Thank you.
Human beings walking on this earth who are kind and loving, and I'm just so thrilled that we could have this conversation, that it's 2019 and that this conversation can happen.
Thank you.
And I hope it continues to happen. So I wish you both all the best in your endeavors. You with your book, you with your event. I really do hope that it all comes together in a really kind and respectful way. And thank you for all the work you're doing to make communities wherever you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, thanks for all your work behind the board. We had
My pleasure.
a great show today.
We sure did.
And, it's really fitting that I usually end the show with Johnny Reed's Today I'm Going to Try and Change the World. And today, we're all trying to change the world and make it a better place. Have a terrific day, everybody. You've been listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Fresh Waves, a Whistle FM production. I'm your host, Brenda Masson, and our technical producer is Jason Rumball. Tune in every Wednesday at 10 a.m. for Fresh Waves here on Whistle FM, 102.9 on the FM dial and whistlefm.com anywhere in the world. Fresh Waves is available on podcast too. Just go to whistlefm.ca or freshwaves.ca. We podcast all of the Fresh Waves shows so that you can listen at your leisure. Fresh Waves. It really is